Each and every individual born deserves equal rights and opportunities, a concept that many Americans believe to have been fully recognized. They may hear this and imagine their society as a place where everyone may pursue their visions without discrimination, regardless of their background. However, the battle that hundreds of people had to go through in order for their descendants to have these freedoms was hard fought and still not over. To this day, many groups in the United States continue to face discrimination, one of these groups being our women. Gender and sex discrimination has been around for centuries, and this was majorly seen in workplaces, where women were underpaid and disrespected while having completed the same work as their male counterparts. Today, we see women working in almost every industry, and the respect given to male employees has been extended to female employees. One may ask, how was this possible? The answer is one single bill. In 1963, a law was passed which marked a significant step upward in the fight for gender equality. This law, passed by John F. Kennedy, is known as the Equal Pay Act of 1963. Prior to the Equal Pay Act of 1963, women were constantly facing discrimination and thus given inadequate income rights. Due to the act being passed, women were ensured higher salaries and were able to take legal responsibility for their own economic rights. This act was a determining factor in the change of beliefs from employees and employers as a result of the shift in the legality and status quo of discriminatory pay and the social divisions, which, in turn, began to narrow the wage gap nationwide. When colonial settlers were first inhabiting America, a belief was created that women did the homework and men did the money work. While, like all beliefs, these did evolve, though the status quo remained that men should be the quantity in the workforce. Throughout the 1800s, women were given more rights and status as people in society. Their ability to vote was emerging, and the responsibilities in our country were growing. As the world wars went on, many male factory workers were being drafted and deployed. Their jobs were left open, and America's economy would fall if they weren't filled. Women were the only choice, even if it were unusual for them to work at jobs at this time. Throughout the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, women were cemented as a new essential part of the workplace, though men did still make up a large percent of the workforce. Most employers during this time severely underpaid women, seeing them as a form of cheaper labor of the same quality, and didn't give them the same benefits they did their male workers. This ideology persisted for many years, but gradually, the awareness of gender discrimination when it came to wages spread much further throughout the United States. People did speak out, which drew some attention from the government. Yet, many of these attempts to claim their rights were left unsuccessful. Protests were held in small accounts by female employees across the country. A way that many women tried to be seen was by enacting unions within their professions, such as the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, the Raises Now Roses movement in Massachusetts, and the Textile Workers Union of America, to name a few. The message that many women were trying to send for equal pay and rights in their workplaces was reaching the government, and many potential bills were proposed. Some of such proposals were the late 1930s Labor Relations Act and the Equal Rights Amendment, which was first proposed in 1923, though even still has a continuing process to be put into place. Nevertheless, only a select few of these laws were passed, and even these didn't affect the horrible ignorance of women's rights in the workplace until the Equal Pay Act, signed on the 10th of June in 1963. It demonstrates a view on discriminatory pay that explains that the concept is unproductive, causing interruptions and conflict in regular workflow, as well as it being extremely unfair, giving unequal pay for equal work. The Act explains that no employer or company may legally discriminate based on gender or change any person's pay from their promised occupation salary. This still allows for wage differentials depending on other factors affecting their or their company's productivity. The Equal Pay Act attempts to fix income contrast, by classifying the loss in money for women in any given workplace due to discrimination as unpaid minimum wage or unpaid overtime, which would legally bind companies to equalize their compensations. Besides direct alterations to general unequal pay before the 1960s, the Act also broke barriers in conditions that women had to encounter while in the midst of their jobs. It specifies that these newfound sexism regulations apply to not only wages, but women's physical conditions, labor disputes, and that they cannot be treated differently for absences than men. The changes to the seeming fundamentals of workplaces in the 1900s, appointed to by the Equal Pay Act, was a huge deal at the time, for the following years, and the next century thus far. The Equal Pay Act began a new era of relationships between men and women as co-workers. Women now had legal backing to defend themselves in the case of any injustice, which created a more respectful and equal environment, as employers now did not have the upper hand to manipulate the rights of their female employees. Many court cases were filed, aided largely by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which was created due to both the Equal Pay Act and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Even if many of these suits were unsuccessful, this gave the women of America the responsibility of all their rights, gaining abilities in society that should have been allowed long before, though specifically after this act, their wage-based rights. Protests and dissatisfaction with working conditions were apparent long before the signing of the act. But now, with the backing of the government, women could take a true stand against any sexism, which became the kickstart to the exponential progress leading into the 21st century. The act effectively made various companies repay their female employees for the numerical prejudices they faced. One of these companies being AT&T, having paid 15,000 employees a total of $15 million for pay inequities. Overall, the Equal Pay Act turned the tables in terms of women's rights to be entitled to adequate pay and the responsibilities of women to fight against any sexism across our nation. Not only did the act benefit workers at the time, but as well as in the years to follow, the act brought about awareness for change when it came to discrimination, which thus led to the passing of many more influential laws. A more recognizable bill was the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which had illegalized wage discrimination as a whole, regardless of gender or race. Other laws include the Family and Medical Leave Act of 1993 and the Fair Pay Act of 1994, which each worked to enhance the working rights of all employees in more specific ways. The forces and concepts that drove forward the creation of these laws came from the Equal Pay Act, proving its significance over time. Similarly, during his presidency, Bill Clinton had taken action in order to further stabilize the wage differentials, stating that in doing so, he would improve the effects of the Equal Pay Act. He claimed that the progress that we had made was incredible, but the wage gap remains, and Americans won't stop until it is closed. Nearly 3 decades after its passing, the act continued to influence people to build up from its powerful foundation and push forward to ensure that men and women have the same salaries in the years to come. Additionally, in 2006, many reports on workplace discrimination were sent out, and with the act and other laws backing, change was brought to these places, aiding women in feeling comfortable and respected in the places they worked. While the wage gap is still apparent in several industries, the act has allowed for significant progress in terms of respect for women's work and according compensation. Leaders across the nation continue to work towards bringing the wage gap closer and closer in order to ensure that all who do equal work receive equal pay. The idea of equality in society has evolved throughout the last few centuries. Thousands have fought and advocated for themselves and others who are denied their inalienable rights. As this progressed, it was clear that there were mixed opinions. This act changed America's view on women's rights and responsibilities as a whole, allowing for the fight for equality to become a continuously evolving reality since then. Women and men are now brought closer together in their workplaces thanks to the hard-fought legacy of the Equal Pay Act of 1963.